All right, Paul Saladino, you're obviously all about proteins, but I want to talk some protein powders.
Yeah,
we can even talk different meat categories too, but kind of rope them all together. In your opinion, from let's say best to worst, there's so many different kinds of protein. There's egg white proteins, there's beef proteins, there's concentrates, there's isolates and whey, there's plant-based proteins. Like, if you had to go from best to worst, what would you do?
I put a link down below for ButcherBox too, if you want to get some really, like, seriously amazing tasting bison. They have amazing ground bison and amazing grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef, which, dude, I really do think that ground beef is, I think ground beef is underrated. Like, you get collagen with it, you get some of the gristle that's actually good for you, but man, we throw that sucker out. That's like, we always say, oh, it's the nice cuts of meat that we want. The ground beef is where it's at. Anyhow, so that link down below gets you grass-fed, grass-finished cuts of meat, not only the cuts of meat, but the ground beef, but also chicken options, pork options, scallops, other seafood options, real bacon, good stuff, all at that link down below, and then it gets delivered to your doorstep. So it takes one step out of the prep. Seriously, give them a shot. It's called ButcherBox. It'll change your life, at least as far as the quality is concerned. Like, if you go to the grocery store and you look at meat now, it's like bright red. It's like not even the way it's supposed to be. You look at ButcherBox, it's like a deep red, the way that it should look. Anyhow, that link is down below, top line of the description.
So framing this, I think there is a time and a place for protein powder, because we're talking about protein powders.
Yeah.
I think that in general, I prefer to eat a steak, a piece of hamburger, a heart, a liver, the meat, that is not made into a protein powder. And in my life, I don't use a protein powder right now, but I understand that there's a time and a place for this. And when I look at protein powders, I think they're great if you're running to the gym or you have this busy life. Like, it's a fantastic thing that's in our purview as humans. So if I were to rank them, I would start with the animal-based proteins. So if we have animal-based proteins versus plant-based proteins, I think there's a clear difference in the protein digestibility and the protein utilization. This is very hard to argue. The lack of certain amino acids, leucine, lysine, other amino acids, or the smaller amounts in plant-based proteins make them less bioavailable, and they are less digestible because plant-based proteins often contain digestive enzyme inhibitors that come with the plants. So animal-based proteins are clearly better. And if we go within the animal-based proteins, there are other problems between plant and animal-based proteins, which I'll get to. Actually, I'll talk about that now since I'm talking animal versus plant. Plant-based proteins also tend to have higher levels of heavy metals. This is also included in the processing, but plants will accumulate heavy metals. If animals are eating bad, grains or grass growing on heavy metal contaminated soil, animals can accumulate heavy metals too, but plants tend to concentrate heavy metals. So a lot of the plants that are used to make plant-based proteins are from plants that will concentrate heavy metals. And if you look at the analysis here, there was a recent review and it looked at 135 of the top selling protein brands on Amazon. 75% of the plant-based proteins had high levels of heavy metals, 75%. Now, I should say that a significant amount of the animal-based proteins also had significant levels of heavy metals, but more of the plant-based proteins had high levels of heavy metals than the animal proteins. And the plant-based proteins that were organic had even higher levels of heavy metals. So plant-based proteins are not something that I think is good for humans at all, but pea protein, soy protein, these are getting into the food supply all over the place. And before I move to the animal-based proteins, let me just talk about soy for a moment, because this is a lightning rod. It's a super lightning rod. Soy protein is not benign. And there is a meta-analysis looking at soy protein isolate and sex hormones. And what you see over time in that meta-analysis is that soy protein consumption didn't affect sex hormones in men. And so plant-based advocates point to that and say, Paul, you are wrong. Soy is benign for sex hormones. What they're missing is the androgen receptor. There are multiple studies in prostate cancer models, which is where we study androgen receptors, showing that soy protein isolate and other plant-based proteins lower androgen receptor densities. So in order for testosterone to work, it has to bind an androgen receptor in the nucleus of a cell. And androgen receptor goes down. The androgen receptor levels go down in cells when you give humans soy isoflavones. So to say that soy protein is benign means you haven't read all of the literature on soy protein. And this is really important because I took heed for that. When I was saying soy protein is garbage, plant-based advocates came back. Good, I love discussion. And they said, look at this meta-analysis. You don't know about this. And now I'm saying look at all this research on prostate cancer and decreased androgen receptors. Soy protein is not benign for humans, which means soy protein isolate, but also tofu, tempeh, whatever else that includes soy.
What about fermented soy? I mean, I'm just curious your take on that, because doesn't that denature some of that?
We'd have to look. I don't know if it will
like
denature. It will denature some of the isoflavones, but I don't know if that's been directly studied.
Yeah.
But it's a good question. It's possible, because the fermentation process across the board with plant foods will often detoxify some of the plant chemicals. So maybe if you could get a fermented soy protein isolate, I don't know why you would.
Yeah, I don't think.
You're thinking just natto specifically.
Yeah, natto. I mean, and you look at like with natto, like there's some regions that like that is the predominant soy ingestion is natto. It's not like, I mean, they are eating other forms, but that is like 70-80% of the soy they're consuming is coming from fermented soy, and they seem to actually be doing pretty well. So that's why I wonder.
It's possible that detoxifies it. We know that with cabbage, for instance, and this is a little off topic, we'll get to the other proteins. With cabbage, when you ferment cabbage, it does degrade many of the isothiocyanates and the glucosinolates. So it will degrade many of the compounds in cabbage that are potentially harmful for the thyroid, because they inhibit the absorption of iodine and the thyroid nutrient. That's a thyroid nutrient that you need. So the isothiocyanates in cabbage can be detoxified with fermentation also. So soy protein, not a fan. I don't know if there's ever been any studies on fermented soy protein. I think that prostate cancer models are totally valid, because whether you're a man with prostate cancer or without prostate cancer, soy protein is going to lower your androgen receptors. So plant-based proteins, not a huge fan of that in any way, shape, or form. I don't know why we've been told animal proteins are bad for us. We can talk about that as well. Within animal proteins, I think about 3 different types. You've got beef protein, you've got whey, and you've got egg. And they're all just about the same bioavailability. I think whey and egg are slightly like 2% better bioavailability than a beef protein. They all have unique benefits. The whey protein is higher in the amino acid cysteine, which leads to increased levels of glutathione when you have a whey protein. So whey protein is beneficial for that.
Is that specific to concentrate, not isolate?
I think it's in both.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when you look at beef protein, the beef protein is higher in glycine, significantly higher in glycine, which is a amino acid that is involved in the formation of glutathione also, but also collagen. So what's cool about a beef protein, so I think the 2 that I would consider that I would most beneficial potentially for humans are the whey and the beef. And the beef is going to have more glycine, like I said. And the cool thing about a beef protein is it's a whole carcass. So we're looking at this because I just launched this brand Lineage. I've got some sticks for you I want you to try. And these are grass-fed, grass-finished beef sticks with organs, and I'm super proud of them. But we're going to launch a protein powder because I know there's a demand for this. And a lot of the ones on the market I'm not a fan of. I don't want to make a protein powder with sucralose or any artificial sweeteners. I want to make a protein powder without anti-caking agents. I just want to make a very, very clean protein powder and probably put some organs in it for people. And it's going to be a beef protein. It's going to be a beef protein powder because it's a whole carcass. And you can see that the cool thing about that is if you look at a steak, there's some glycine, but if you look at a whole carcass beef protein, it's going to have a lot more glycine. So you're actually getting the collagen and the meat together as if you were to eat the whole animal. So that's kind of an interesting thing for me. Again, benefits to whey, absolutely. The other thing that I wish we could find with whey is a truly raw whey protein, because there are, if you look at the research on raw milk, this is a slight digression, but I think it's interesting. If you look at the research on raw milk, there are studies, the Gabriella study and other studies that show that kids who grow up drinking raw milk have lower rates of asthma, eczema, and allergies. And I don't know how people say raw milk is not beneficial for humans. All raw foods have a risk of contamination. Raw milk is being done increasingly well now.
Yeah, so does raw spinach when you get E. coli.
Exactly. Raw fish, raw spinach, huge risk of contamination. But if you look at the research on raw milk, it's fascinating. The benefits of raw milk are probably in the raw whey protein. The undenatured whey protein.
Could you extract it and put it into a powder form without heating it to such a degree that
you could. It's just that there's no production line for it. There's no supply chain. Yeah. And it's actually almost illegal because of the benefits or because of the limitations on raw milk. I mean, I went to this farm in California I was telling you about, the raw farm, and they were showing me how they separate the curds from the whey for their cheese. And I was thinking, gosh, you're dumping all of this raw whey down the drain. They can't do anything. They legally cannot sell that raw whey, but you could make whey protein out of a raw whey. But most places that are making raw cheese are not doing it as good as this farm. They're heating the cheese up really high. So this farm actually only heats their cheese to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. It's really, really not heating it much, very, very little. But a lot of other companies making raw cheese are heating it to 150 for a minute and then bringing it back down. And the question is, at what point does the whey protein become denatured? It looks like maybe 145 degrees. Yeah. The whey protein changes conformation. And so the hypothesis here is that this undenatured whey protein could be beneficial in programming the immune system. You think about all of the whey protein that you get from human breast milk, right? I don't know. Is that true? We should check that.
I don't think you get a lot. You get a lot of like the lactoferrin and whatnot, which you want to talk about too. But
but you're definitely getting undenatured proteins from human breast milk, which are affecting the immune system. We should check that before we put that in the podcast. I don't know if whey protein is actually in human breast milk.
We'll let someone check it out in the comment section.
Yeah. So, but then you get the whey protein is valuable, but it's really hard to get raw whey protein from cows. So all the protein you're getting from whey is going to have people say there's raw whey protein. It's really tricky. Mm-hmm. Let's say undenatured whey protein, that's what you want. And so potentially that has benefits in terms of programming the immune system also. But I think either a beef protein from whole carcass with glycine is good, or a whey protein. Now, the other thing to consider is if you're eating a protein powder, if you're drinking a protein powder, look for the COA, look for the certificate of analysis from the company, and look to see that they're testing for heavy metals. Look to see that they're testing for BPA, which is this endocrine disrupting compound, because BPA is also found in 55% of those 135 Amazon proteins tested by this consumer group. So BPA is in a lot of protein also, bisphenol A, hormone disruptor. And I think that when you're getting a protein, make sure that there's like very, very low levels of those things. Look for the COA, know what you're taking in, because this again can be a significant level of contamination for heavy metals.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a good point. I did a separate video on this, but not everyone sees everything. Thank you, algorithm. But like I made a pretty big pivot from being a pretty big like whey protein isolate guy to being much more pro concentrate. Not over whey protein isolate per se, but when I started seeing the benefits of actually having basically the full spectrum and bioactive compounds that are in like a concentrate versus an isolate. I used to be, it's such a meathead way of thinking, right? Like the isolate, pure isolated protein, slightly more insulinogenic, slightly more in the way of muscle protein synthesis by a small margin, and it's just, there's nothing else in it. It's leaner, it's cleaner, it's faster. And I'm not anti-whey protein isolate, don't get me wrong, but I used to be pretty anti-concentrate until I started really, trying it for myself and realizing, I would be bloated a little bit in the beginning, but then as I would adjust to just perhaps the lactose, because I didn't consume a whole lot of dairy at the time, right?
Is there much lactose in a whey protein?
Well, in a concentrate there is. So in an isolate there's not, which is why I typically would. I thought that, and this is going off on a tangent, I thought I was pretty sensitive to lactose. I was, until you actually got me on raw milk.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it was like the raw milk didn't affect me, so I don't know what's going on there. And
we can talk about it.
We can table that for a second, but the whey protein concentrate with the lactoferrin and sort of the ability to, you got to be careful saying this word on YouTube, but basically I'm going to use the word bind instead of the word that starts with C, C-H-E-L. Like you just get weird. It's like,
why can't you say that?
I don't know. It's been going on for a long time. I think it's just because people were doing like videos on like detoxing and stuff like that. Oh. So that used to be like a big flag word. Anyway, it's kind of funny, but basically, it binds to excess iron, right? So you get, which has a huge positive impact on the gut. That's why lactoferrin is so tremendous for the gut.
Right.
So I didn't realize that like whey protein concentrate had a pretty significant amount of lactoferrin, right? Because the only other place you're going to get lactoferrin is from colostrum, and good luck getting real like colostrum.
It's so hard.
Yeah, so it's just not going to happen. Like even with powders, like you can get it to a certain degree, but it's nothing to the same effect as like real colostrum.
It's illegal to sell.
Yeah, it's flat out illegal. So
you cannot,
unless you know someone, you're walking, going to their farm and stealing it. It's just.
But the powders do have benefits. Even the colostrum powders, they're beneficial, but obviously the colostrum straight out of the cow would be amazing.
Yeah, no, I do take colostrum powder. I just like completely unflavored, just straight up, and I just dry scoop it, right?
Yeah.
So it's, and that's for a gut benefit. And
there's a lot of research on colostrum powder.
Yeah,
we make one at Hard and Soil. We see amazing results with that.
Yeah, and this isn't a paid plug for anybody, not even for you guys. It's just like the bottom line is like I actually notice a difference with colostrum. I noticed
cool.
When I had a gut parasite back that I got from, funny enough, Raw Scallops.
Raw Scallops at like a sushi place.
Yeah, it was at a poke place. I got Cryptosporidium. It's bad. Seatbelted to the toilet for like 3 weeks and lost like 17 pounds. It was bad, man. It was anyway. like colostrum was a huge piece for me, like bringing my stuff back, because I ended up with multiple ulcers after that because everything just degraded. And that's what kind of like turned a little bit of my diet around, like to being much more gut focused. Right?
Yeah.
So going off on a tangent, I just wanted to mention that though. So people that are kind of always wondering between like isolate and concentrate, like isolate, I think might be a little bit better if it's like a post-workout situation and you're like, I want nothing else but straight protein. But like there is a whole food component that is to concentrate. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing. I mean, I think that, like I said in the beginning, I'm always going to advocate for a whole food over a protein powder in the first place. But there is a place for this, for convenience, for quickness, maybe for absorption for a lot of people that helps them get that amount of protein in their diet. How much protein are you getting now?
I'd say about 200 grams.
Okay. Yeah. And what do you weigh?
185.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're even above 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight.
I just like my protein. I mean, there's some days I'm probably 250. I mean, it's just like there's days where I don't really count anymore, right? I don't count calories. I don't do any of that. So I was kind of telling you what I eat earlier. I mean, I eat probably a pound to 2 pounds of like relatively lean ground beef per day. I eat a lot of ground chicken. I eat a lot of, that's kind of like just my diet. It's like
I walked in, you were spooning in ground beef and chicken. Like spooning it.
I could go to town on ground beef.
Yeah,
I could just eat that forever. Like so, and I did a video recently on that too. Like when I was like the gristle and like the collagen that's in ground beef.
That's what you want.
Yeah, like people don't realize like there's also a synergistic potential. I'm going to say potentially because it's not hard evidence, but a potentially synergistic effect of actually consuming the collagen along with it. Like actually like a sort of like a peptide almost signaling effect when you consume the collagen and along with additional like the actual meat protein.
That's the way we would have had it evolutionarily. I mean, some of the meat we would have had on animals. So I hunted with the Hadza in Tanzania. We ate the whole animal. It wasn't a terribly fatty animal because it was a baboon, but there's sinew and all these things. And if you look at the majority of the cuts on a cow, I mean, a lot of us, right? Myself, I mean, I'm guilty of this sometimes. We go to the grocery store and we get one cut of steak. The majority of what I eat, 95% of what I eat is ground beef. 95% of what I eat is ground beef anyway, because the cows in Costa Rica are Brahman cows and they're not that, they're not that good. I mean, they're probably more good from a collagen perspective and a glycine perspective and an amino acid balance perspective, but like the steaks are just not as good in Costa Rica. But when I'm here in the States, if I'm grilling with friends or something, I'm going to get either a skirt steak, a ribeye, maybe in New York. Those are my 3 steaks. But you figure like there's only a few of those on the animal. The majority of the animal is chuck roast and stuff that has more connective tissue and it's tougher. So we're either going to cook it in a crock pot or find a way to make it less tough because it contains more collagen, but because of the way we make our foods in the US, we eat less of those cuts generally, unless we're getting ground beef. So in a lot of ways, ground beef is kind of a superfood. Like you want a more collagenous meat, ground beef has more collagen mixed with the muscle meat than a lot of the lean steaks do. So that's why I think there's a unique benefit to a beef protein in a lot of ways. If you're looking for the collagen component, then that's there too. And that's really interesting that there's this protein, because when I was looking at the amino acids, I thought, well, maybe we should make a beef protein with a collagen blend. And I thought, we don't even need to, it's already in there. Yeah. It's already in there. So I guess for the listeners, if you're only eating steaks, you're only eating lean meat, there are potential benefits to including a collagen source in your diet, whether it's a bone broth, all these things, because the idea here is methionine, glycine balance, or just having this amino acid that is in the animal, this glycine, to make the collagen and to make glutathione. And the longevity community is funny. They always point out that excess methionine, this is one of the reasons that animal foods get vilified in the longevity space, because of a series of studies on mice looking at methionine restriction, extending lifespan. But what I rarely hear discussed in the longevity community is that in the same animal models, when you supplement the animal feed with glycine, they live just as long as methionine restriction. So the hypothesis here is, imagine that. If you give evolutionarily inappropriate food to mice, they don't live as long. If you give them less evolutionarily inappropriate food, they extend their life. Nobody talks about enough the idea that if you give them glycine, that seems to be beneficial. And there is evidence in older adults that supplementing older adults with cysteine and glycine, 2 of the amino acids in glutathione, that these are critical for. This is super critical. Actually, I think I've been saying that wrong. But these amino acids are critical for both collagen and glutathione production, and they extend. I think that there's an improvement in quality of life in older adults when you supplement them with these amino acids.
So, what's your take, first of all, on collagen supplementation, but in that vein, marine collagen versus bovine collagen?
So I've talked to a lot of producers. Marine collagen is the worst quality collagen.
Really?
Yes. They always say, oh, everyone likes marine collagen because people fear beef now because there's a zeitgeist.
Or do they just think like fish are flexible and they think, it's easy to relate.
Well, they think
collagen.
fish is healthy, right?
Yeah.
And then if you look at the heavy metals in marine collagen, it's going to be higher than a beef collagen over across the board because fish are higher in heavy metals than beef across the board. Marine collagen is the worst type of collagen. It's the cheapest type of collagen.
Really?
Yes. It's what people put in there because they want it to look a certain way or they want to appeal to an audience.
They charge more for it.
They do charge more for it. They're probably trying to appeal to women, not to be sexist, but women fear red meat.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem, it's not womanly to eat a steak, but it's womanly to eat salmon.
My wife eats more steak than meat.
That's because she's smart, right? that's because you got a good wife. But yeah, I mean, you look at these, you look at the protein powders marketed to women and it's in like shiny packages and it's marine collagen and that's the worst kind.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's just, I've always wondered that. So, I mean, you're not anti-collagen supplementation then, is that great?
I'm not anti-collagen supplementation. Again, no, the certificate of analysis of your collagen because collagen has a variety of qualities as well. And there was another analysis of collagen showing that a lot of collagens do have high levels of heavy metals because lower quality collagens coming from South American sources, Chilean and Argentinian beef are made from hoof and hide. Most collagen supplements are made from hoof and hide, but what the cow eats gets into the beef, gets into the collagen. And so I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of greenwashing to Chilean and Argentinian beef where they say it's grass fed and they feed them grass pellets.
Yeah.
And if you're in a feedlot getting fed grass pellets in South America, you can call it grass fed. But imagine that the cows are also just not, the grass pellets are not the same as the grass. They could have more heavy metals. And we see this, that some of those collagens coming from the low quality sources that are kind of greenwashed grass-fed collagen have higher amounts of heavy metals. Huh. So it's tricky. So the quality, imagine that, a quality of your supplement matters. Yeah, right. And not all collagen is the same. Not all beef protein is the same. Not all whey protein is the same. Probably not all pea protein is the same. There's probably pea protein out there that's better than other pea proteins, but how do you know unless the company that you're having is willing to be transparent? And that's why it's cool for me to kind of, move laterally and build a food company with the idea that I want to be transparent with everything with people and show them and say, look, the things we make may be a little more expensive, but believe me, I vetted all this and I wouldn't give something and I'm going to show the COA for all the things.
You also just have so much energy. You don't know what to do with it.
No, that's because, that's because
your lifestyle.
That's because my mitochondria work. We talked about that, when we were hanging out. That
if you got that much energy, you should spin up food companies. You should do that kind of stuff.
And also because look, if you can do those things, why not do something good in the world? And
sure.
I said in the beginning, I want people to eat a steak or a hamburger or a piece of liver or a piece of heart. But if you won't eat organs, then here are some desiccated organ capsules from New Zealand with heart and soil. And if you won't eat a steak or you're on the run, then, we made the Lineage meat sticks and we're going to make the Lineage protein.
Heck yeah. Well, and for those people that are looking at some of the beef proteins out there in the market, just be really, really cautious. Because I was talking to you before about this, is back in the early 2000s, beef protein isolate got kind of popularized, and there's all these companies that were just it was basically collagen and they would just amino spike it. Mm-hmm. And amino spiking is for people that aren't familiar with it, it's just basically where you're adding additional, usually just EAAs in to increase what you can legally put on a label as the protein count. Less and less companies are doing it, thankfully, because people are actually looking for it. But the beef proteins were the big ones with that, because they could be it was basically just hoof and hide plus some aminos added to make it look like a complete protein.
And hoof and hide, again, is the collagen that we were talking about. And that can be problematic depending on the source. Yeah. So if you can get a good beef protein, it's going to be higher in the glycine. The whey protein has the benefits of the cysteine. But those two amino acids are valuable for humans long term.
Right on, man. Where can everyone find you, Paul?
Paul Saladino, MD, on all the socials.
Right on. Thanks,
brother.
Thanks.